I have just built the ultimate B2B SEO reporting automation directly in n8n. And in this video, what I'm going to do is show you step by step, node by node, how I built this. But before all that, I'm going to show you how this works and what the output looks like. So what we have is a schedule. So this fires automatically every Monday, but I'm just going to manually execute this just so you can get a feel for how this all works and what it looks like. So up at the top here, we have a set of keywords. Those keywords are then passed through Google Search Console. So what we're doing is we're taking the average position of those keywords in the last week. And this is across both the UK, so you can see GBR, and the US. At the end here, we then merge and amalgamate that data. As we come down here, we have quite a big loop node. So the loop at the top, this is pulling GA4 data. So this is looking at organic sessions and conversions last week versus the week before. We're picking up whether we've landed any new backlinks. And we're also checking for any traffic and conversion data that's come directly from an LLM or an AI model such as ChatGPT. And then we post the output directly to Slack. Once that automation completes, it fires an update that looks a little bit like this. So we've got our Google Search Console performance, we've got our GA4 performance, we've got our keyword rankings and the averages from Search Console. We've got our top content performers as well. So those that are gaining in clicks and reducing in clicks. We've then got the traffic sent from an LLM, such as ChatGPT, and any conversion data off of the back of that. And then finally, it also fires in the backlinks that we've landed in that last week, and then some metrics to accompany that. So what I'm going to do in this video is show you step by step, node by node, exactly how to build this. If you're not interested in learning how to build the workflow, that's absolutely fine. You can get free access to the workflow I'm about to walk you through simply this way. So if you subscribe to the channel, then sign up to the link in the description. You'll be emailed a Notion board that looks like this. Now this has the show notes to every single video that I've created on YouTube. If you click the first link in the description, you'll have a relatively empty board that looks a little bit like this. By the time this goes out, I will have the video embedded, the one that you're actually watching. If you navigate to the workflow here, right click and hit download, this will download the JSON workflow. Then quite simply go into your n8n instance, open up a new space, click the ellipsis and select import from file and simply import the workflow. And you will have a version that looks identical to this. And all you'll then need to do is just connect your APIs and you will be good to go. If we've not met before, my name's Ben Alfrey. I'm co-founder of Session Media. We're a B2B performance marketing agency, and we've helped generate our clients in the tens of millions of pounds worth of pipeline over the last 7 or 8 years. So if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, simply Google Session Media, navigate to the Get Proposal landing page, fill in the contact form. Once you fill in the contact form on the Get Proposal landing page, you and I will jump on a strategic call to see how Session Media can help achieve your pipeline goals going into next year. Okay, that's enough of the promotional stuff. Let's get into the video. Okay, guys, before we dive headfirst into the workflow, it's always good to understand the logic behind how the workflow works. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see people going with their, when building their workflows, is they don't really think about the theory of how everything is going to connect together. They either just download a workflow, they'll just start building those. They won't really think logically as to how all the pieces of the puzzle will fit together. So from a high level, quite simply, this is how the reporting automation all works together. So I've got a master sheet that has all my platform IDs. So my Search Console ID, any Google Sheets ID, GA4 property ID, Slack channel ID. You can pretty much add whatever you want into this sheet. Now, of course, we have many clients, so having this in a central place is quite integral. If you're B2B business, just have one sheet with all your marketing platform IDs. So then how does this work? Well, this master sheet sends those IDs to the relevant mini workflow within the overall workflow. So for example, it would send the Google Search Console ID to a Google Search Console node. So in this case, I have a node that only looks at last week's data. I then have a node connected to that looks at this week's data, and then I have a code node that compares the data. So we have a node that looks at last week, we have a node that looks at this week, and then we have a code node that essentially aggregates and compares. We then pass all of that into a merge, and that theory works across every single marketing platform we have. So it then works across GA4, that looks at last week, it looks at this week in the next node, and then it has a comparison node and then sends it to a merge. So everything comes to this central merge node. Once we have all the data in the merge, bear in mind that the data is going to take many different forms, and Slack needs it in a format that it can understand. So we then have a code node that formats that data, and then it pushes that formatted data into Slack. So that's it. That's pretty much it. So in reality, this is what it looks like, right? So I'm going to start from the top and go through to the end. Now, usually, as mentioned, we would have a weekly trigger that fires on this, but for the sake of the video, I've just connected a manual execution into this just so that we can run it and test it and everything. Ignore this webhook here. I've just connected that so that I can connect my Claude instance into n8n to help me debug. So at the start here, we have a set node. So in the set node, I put the specific sheet ID where all my master marketing platform IDs live. So this is this is what that looks like. Now at the top, I don't think you can see this, but in the Google Sheets URL, between the // and the /edit is usually a sequence of letters and numbers. Now this is actually the unique ID of that Google Sheet. So what I do is I copy that ID and I put it into a set node with the naming convention sheet ID. So this sheet ID is then pushed into a Google Sheets node. And what we're doing is we're using the get rows operation to look up all the rows that sit within that sheet ID. And you can access this if I just show you, click the plus button, go to Google Sheets, and then down here, there's a get rows in Sheets. Now, the one thing you have to bear in mind when you start setting up any Google products is you need to ensure that the credentials are the same throughout every single node. So what do I mean by this? Well, Google needs to understand that you've got permission to view that sheet, basically. So if you've never set up credentials with Google Cloud Console, what you need to do is go to the drop down and go to create new credential. When you go to create new credential, you'll be met with a sign-in window that looks a little bit like this. Now, if you're planning to use Google Search Console, Google Analytics, maybe some other Google products, you actually need to create a project in Google Cloud Console, and you need to enable the relevant APIs. So I'll give you a quick whistle-stop tour as to how to do this. If you Google Cloud Console, head over to the Cloud Console landing page. Up at the top here, you'll be able to create a new project. So I've got my automated reporting project down here, which is what I'm using specifically for this workflow. If you select the burger icon on the left-hand side, you scroll down to APIs and services. There's a couple of things you need to do. So the first thing is jump into library. And what you're going to do is find the specific APIs that you need and enable them here. So if I search for Google Search Console API, open up the first click that you see and just ensure that it's enabled. Go back. The next one we're going to do is Google Analytics. Now, I actually think, yeah, this is find Google Analytics data API and ensure that that's enabled. Once you've done both of those, you then need to do the same with the Google Sheets API and just ensure that that's enabled. Now, once you've done all three of those, go back into that burger menu, select credentials. And what you need to do is create credentials, create an OAuth client ID, and then go through the setup here. Now, don't worry too much about all these name conventions up at the top here. So web application, web app 2, and then hit create. And what this will give you is a client secret and a client user. You need to save these credentials in your notes because you'll only be able to see them once. And then when you go and set up your Search Console and your GA4, it will specifically ask for the user and for the client secret as well. And that's where you input it, and that's where you confirm your credentials. Do also make sure that you're using the same Google Workspace as well. So whatever your the same email that you're logged into when you're setting up the Cloud Console, make sure that you're signing into the same email in your n8n workflow. This will make a little bit more sense as I go through this. So once you set up your read client config, what I've done is I've quite simply just passed my sheet ID into the ID here. And then this pulls the correct spreadsheet. And obviously when I execute, it will pull the rows from that sheet on the right-hand side. And that's how I know that I've been correct. So the next bit, so as you can see, we've split this out into almost like two bigger workflows. So let's go from the top. So the first one is a big loop node. So a loop allows us to search through different marketing platforms systematically until we've got all the data or checked all the data that is needed before pushing all that into the next step, basically. So let's start from the top here. So this is all part of the same loop. So you can see we've got 5 different strings coming away from this loop. So the first one is read client keywords. Now we do have rank trackers at the agency, but I also like to pull average keyword positions directly from Google Search Console. So I think this gives us a more granular view on how we fared across the week. So what I've done is I've added all the keywords into a separate tab in my automated reporting sheet for each individual client. And all this does, similar to the last node, is it's another get rows operation from Google Sheets, but I not only give it the document ID, which was the same as the config sheet ID, but I also give it the sheet name as well. So the document ID is the master spreadsheet ID, and then the sheet ID is the individual sheets that sit within that document. So I'm just going to execute this and show you what this looks like. So of course, I can't show you any of the keyword data, unfortunately, but you'll see that this is flashed up in green. We can see that it's the same ID from the last client config, and we can see that this is the client name plus keywords, which is the correct tab as shown down here in our automated reporting sheet. So I know that everything's pulling from the correct sheet. And on the right-hand side, it's pulled the list of keywords, the URLs, and the country that we're looking to track that particular keyword for the particular URL sitting next to it. What we've then done is we split this off into the UK and the US. So quite a few clients, we monitor and manage their search performance in the UK and the US. So as such, we need to make sure that we're tracking the same set of keywords across these different regions. So you might not need this depending on where you're based, but this logic is essentially the same above and below. So let's take the Great Britain example. So what we've done is we've put in a if node. So in the last node here, it's also pulled the country on the right-hand side. And what we've said is that if the country equals GBR, then it passes through this workflow here. If the country equals the USA, then it passes through this workflow down at the bottom here, or this loop, I should say. So again, we've put another mini loop in because what we're doing is with N8N, we have to check one keyword at a time. So we have to send one keyword through this loop, then send the other one. We can't check everything all at once. If you imagine trying to check the individual keyword performance in Google Search Console, you would have to do this one by one, and essentially the workflow has to work the same. So how have we pulled the average position from Google Search Console? So these next two nodes here are what we call an HTTP request node. And what an HTTP request node allows us to do, add in an API key, and then the system uses this API key as almost like a gateway to go into that marketing platform and pull the data that we need in the format that we need it. Now, without getting too technical here, and I think in the age of AI, you can just ask Claude for this information. But if you have a look at the Search Console API documentation, you can actually see that if we're looking to, query our search traffic data, which is exactly what we're doing, we need to provide a URL that looks like this with our example domain in the middle. And then at the end, we add our API key. And then the structure in the body needs to look like this. We need to give it a start date, end date, and then any dimensions that we're looking to use. If I come back into the workflow, if you click the plus button and just search HTTP request, the node will look a little bit like this. So I'll show you how we've set up this one. So this is Google Search Console, only looking at Great Britain, of course, and we're just looking at last week position. If you have a look at the URL, this very much matches the URL that's given in the documentation here. Now, the difference is that I'm dynamically pulling the URL based on the client config sheet that's written here. Now, one thing to also bear in mind is that in Google Search Console, it has a naming convention you must follow. So if you've registered the domain property in Google Search Console, the site URL will start sc-domain : and then domain.com. So you don't need https // www. anything like that. You just need the domain.com. So with all our clients, we have the domain property. So in my reporting sheet, I've added the domain property, sc-domain, and then the domain.com. And then the workflow essentially pulls that domain from the sheet from a previous node. So this means that I can loop through all of the different domains that we're looking to get this data from dynamically without having to hard code this. Now, if you're a specific business, you can follow the documentation exactly as this. So you can add in the URL that you're looking to query, for example. As we scroll down here, you'll notice that you need to set up your authentication. So we've already done this. So go to predefined credential type, go to Google OAuth 2 API, and then find the project that you've just previously set up. Then toggle send body, JSON. And then what I'll do is I'll just open this up so it's a slightly bigger window. Now, I got this by asking Claude to give me the specific JSON file that is needed so that I can pull the correct keyword for the specific page for this specific country from the spreadsheet that I've already set up, which is my keywords tab down at the bottom down here. And Claude helped me generate this. Now, this does match to a degree the documentation that's listed in the Search Console API, but in the age of AI, you can quite simply just feed it the documentation here and tell it exactly what you want. But if we look at this, it does kind of make sense, right? So the dimension is page, operator is equals, and the expression, this is looking for the specific URL. Same with country equals GBR, and the query, again, it's looking for the specific keyword that has been listed in that Google Sheet from that master document. But again, Claude generated this directly for us, okay? I didn't write this manually. If I then go to execute step, we can see that the inputs are firing. And on the right-hand side, as it's going through every single row, of course, I'll have to blur this all out, but it's got the, at the top here in key 0, it's got the keyword, it's got the GBR, and it's got the URL that it's looking to rank that specific keyword for. And then it's got our click impression CTR and position data all the way down here. And as mentioned, we're in a loop. So this is going to look at one item at a time. So that was last week. This week works pretty much the exact same. So it's going to be the same URL at the top. It's going to be the same post. The body is obviously going to be slightly different. So the only thing that is going to change is the date range. So we're looking at -7 days versus -1 day. So this is the week before last week versus the week just gone. But the body of the JSON is going to remain the exact same. And usually when it lights up in green, that means that it's found something and that we've got data successfully. But as I said, the best way for you to grab this outside of just downloading the workflow and copying the JSON itself is to go to Claude or GPT 5.2 and just ask it for the JSON file for Google Search Console so that you can compare week on week the query data based on the list of keywords that you have, the pages and the country that you're tracking those keywords in. So once it's done all of that, we use a code node at the end here to essentially combine it. And all we've done to generate this is we've asked Claude to give us the JavaScript that gives us the outputs that we're looking for. So I said, okay, we've got last week's data from Search Console. We've got this week's data. Now give me the JavaScript that can essentially compare the two and then give the output that we're looking for, which is any changes in ranking position. At the end of this, we've just got a rate limit delay. So although you get thousands of queries in Search Console every day, the rate limiter just means that it won't time out. So this is set usually to half a second, just so that we're not absolutely blitzing the API and it starts breaking. So as mentioned, this will loop through keyword by keyword. Once it's completed all the keywords from that Google Sheet, it will send all this data in this done branch to an overall code node that essentially calculates the position changes between all the keywords and all their positions that we've just sent it. And again, I've just used GPT-5 to give me the JavaScript for this. We then send this data to a merged node and run near enough an identical workflow, but just looking at the USA down at the bottom here. And then this is the second input. Merged nodes are great if we have a lot of data that we need to bring together in a centralized place. And this is exactly what we've done here. So to find a merge node, quite simply click the plus button, merge, and then just list the number of inputs that the merge node will be receiving. So in this case, it's 2. We've got the GBR and the USA. What I'm going to do is just execute this. So I will have to blur this out, but I'll give you a summary of just how this data stacks between the two. Okay, this is now completed, this node, and although I'll have to obviously blur some of this out, you can see that the country has given us Great Britain, it's given us the USA. It's then given us the sequence in which it generated this data. So it's got this week's position, last week's position, the change. We've also added in a change icon. That was done in the code node. So again, just ask Claude to give you like an icon that shows the change in position. So an arrow pointing up if it's improved or down if it's decreased, basically. Then we've got position change absolute, and then we've got clicks and impressions as well. So this is essentially amalgamated all the data that we need. And then typically what we need to do after this is just format it in a way that the rest of the workflow can understand. So in some cases you need a final code node just to format everything. In some cases you don't. I always like to put one in because I like to tidy things up along the way instead of just dumping everything into, say, one centralized merged node at the end and then trying to unpick it. I think that's just far more hassle than it's worth. So what I'm going to do is just run this wrap keywords data node to show you what that final output looks like. Now, along the way, as you're sort of testing, what I recommend you doing is just pinning the data. So this means that it doesn't rerun this workflow every single time you make a small change, because obviously that takes a lot of time, as you can imagine. So pinning the data just means it holds the data in place as you test another node. So I've literally just pinned all this data here, and this means that, as we can see, this is fired a lot quicker and it's now completed. So although I'll have to blur a lot of this out, you'll notice that it's now in one single block. They're not in single items, which means that all the data is formatted as an array, and it can pass it into the bigger merge node below. And then as we move down, what I'm going to do is just pin that, because as we run the workflow, I don't need it to keep running this mini workflow above over and over again. Now let's come down to the other nodes. Now, in truth, the theory of this is all the same, right? So we've got GA4 this week, GA4 last week, we've got a process node. Search Console last week, Search Console this week, process node. Reading the backlinks that we've added, and then we've got a filter based on the backlinks that we've placed in the last week. Then I've done another run just looking at content performance overall, Search Console, so not at the keyword level, but actually more at the URL level. This week, last week, and then a process node, and then LLM traffic this week, last week, and then a process node. And this LLM traffic is quite simply using a regex formula that I'll show you to pull this data directly from GA4. So this is actually just another 2 GA4 nodes. So if I go into the GA4 node, you can see that this is actually an HTTP request node. You can tell by the blue globe icon. It's another post. And then the URL, I would highly recommend asking Claude to give you the correct URL and the correct JSON based on the outputs that you're looking for. But again, we can go into the Google Analytics API overview data. We can have a look at all the different sort of reports that we can pull from the API. And if we have a look at this run report, this returns a customized report for Google Analytics event data and is the preferred method for simple report queries, which is what we're looking for. We're just looking for conversion data and session data. So if I open this in a new tab, yeah, so the example they've given, country active users, we're just looking for quite a high level report, as mentioned, on the conversions and sessions from the organic traffic source. We can see that we've got the URL down here. So analyticsdata.googleapis.com, v1 beta properties, then add your GA property ID. This GA property ID, if you go into your GA4 interface, go into the left-hand side, property details, on the top right-hand side will be a number. That will be your property ID, colon, and then run report. If I come back into my workflow, we can see that this takes the exact shape, and all I've done again is dynamically pulled the ID from the automated reporting master sheet that I've got here. It's my GA4 property ID, sits at the top here. So what it's done is the workflow has pulled this ID directly from this sheet dynamically. And again, it just means that for all our clients, it can go through that list and pull the relevant ID based on the client. As we scroll down, send body, JSON, using JSON, and then if I open this up, we can see, again, I haven't created this from scratch. I asked Claude to give me the JSON body for an HTTP request node for J4, and the outputs I'm looking for is how many sessions and how many key events were triggered from organic search in the last 7 days. Now, if I go into the API documentation, I highly recommend you give Claude the API documentation so that it's got the most up-to-date documents on how to pull the data correctly from J4. You can see that the data, the shape of what the JSON should look like, is all listed here. So add this into Claude and then give it the outputs that you want to achieve from running that HTTP request node. And then the node next to it, just as above, this works the exact same way, but this time it's last week. So copy and paste the node, but change the date range again to be minus 14 days and then minus 8 days and the difference between the two. And then as always, we're then going to ask Claude to give us a code node that can essentially process the data and give it to us in a format that the workflow can read and understand. So again, it looks a little bit like this. The inputs, I didn't write this, of course, and the outputs should look something like this, where it's in one big array. And then we send this to a bigger merge node. And then we pretty much do the same across Google Search Console. So this node down here, this gives us our top performers. And all these two nodes are doing is looking at content that's generated the most clicks and the content that's generated the least clicks, and the percentage changes between the two. So we can get a feel for the content that's performing really well, maybe content that we need to better optimize, broadly speaking. When we come on to read backlinks, this works the exact same way as we set up our automated report, but we point the nodes to a slightly different sheet. So for all of our clients, we have a sheet listing all the backlinks that we place. So again, I just go into that sheet and I identify the sheet ID, which is in the URL path at the top between the D/ and before the / edit. So what this node will do is look for a sheet called link placement. And on the right hand side here, you'll see that it's pulled all 678 backlinks that we've placed for this client. Now, for the sake of this workflow, this isn't any good for us because we just want to have a look at the links that it's placed in the last week. So after the read backlinks Google Sheet, we then create a code node that is essentially like a filter. Now, you can create this with a filter node as well, like this. But what I find by asking Claude to give me the exact code for the code node is that there's less room for error. So in some cases, I have issues with it following like the correct date format and things like that. So I always find with a code node that it's a lot better when I one-shot it, basically. But you can use a filter node, basically, but I just use a code node. And again, this then pulls the number of backlinks placed in the last week. And as mentioned, I've asked Claude to generate this. So I haven't generated any of this, but you'll notice that it pulls the DR, trust flow, citation flow, it pulls the category, and it obviously pulls the URL and traffic to the domain as well. So these are all metrics that we track directly in the backlink sheet that we provide our client. And you'll notice that the output again is in that same array format as the other nodes above it. So the final run of this loop is putting traffic from LLMs and any conversion or key events from those LLMs. So what you'll notice is, first, it's another HTTP request. It's another GA4 URL. So this URL is identical to the conversion GA4 URL that we've got a couple of runs above it. The authentication, again, predefined credential, Google OAuth, and then it must be the exact same OAuth project that we've used across the other nodes. If this is different, then it won't pull the data that you're looking for. So as mentioned right at the start, just make sure it's the same project used throughout. So I've made that error a couple of times. Toggle send body as always, body content type JSON as always, using JSON as always. And then I used Claude to help generate this JSON text, of course, but let me just walk you through the logic because you can pull this stuff directly in GA4. So the start and the end date is the exact same as it's always been. We're then looking for a session source. From that session source, we're looking to pull sessions and key events. Those are the two data points that we want. Now, the session source is a partial regex, and this is the regex formula down here. So what this does is it queries GA4 and looks for any traffic that has come from any of these major AI models. So we've got Perplexity, we've got ChatGPT, Bard, Gemini, DeepSeek. You can pretty much add any model that you want into this, but these are the major ones. And we found that this is sort of a good catch-all for all of them. So you can also go into your GA4 property, go to session source, open up a report and run this as a regex, and it will give you the exact same data. And then the next node works the exact same as the previous one. So that was this week. This is last week. And then we've got a process node up at the top here. And just in case that wasn't clear, these are all code nodes. And what I find is when you're building these workflows with AI, they will use quite a few code nodes because we can get very custom with the output that we're looking for. So just open up a code node, code in JavaScript, and just ask Claude or GPT-5 to give you the JavaScript snippet of code that needs to go into the code node to give you the outputs that you're looking for, which in this case is to process all the raw data that's been pulled between these two nodes. So all of these go into one big merge node. As you can see, we've got 6 different inputs here. Now, what this means is that we've got all this data that's all come together, but we need to make sure that Slack can understand this data. So we add in a code node here to format the data that's coming to merge so that it's in a Slack friendly format. So if I open this up, again, I've had Claude generate this for me, and I probably will have to blur a lot of this out, unfortunately. But this is essentially the message that is going to be fired into Slack, and the one that you saw right at the start of the video. And if I open this up, just to give you a bit of a size as how big this is, we've got nearly 230 different rows. But as mentioned, you can add as much or as little as you want into this code node, but this is essentially our Slack message here. And then the final part of this is setting up the Slack node so that it fires directly into your Slack workspace. So recently, n8n have made it much easier to set up a Slack message. So if you click the plus, search for Slack, we now have a send a message node, which is awesome because we didn't actually have this before. If you've never set up Slack before, the creation of the project is quite similar to how you would set up Google Cloud Console. So just go to create new credentials, go to connect my account. You will need to set up in the admin a project that is connected to this workflow. And then quite simply, you can select send as the operation, send a message to either a channel or a user. A message type is simple message, and then the message text, select expression, and then you just pull the text here. So this will fire essentially the output from the format Slack code, and then you can hit execute. And if I just show you what this looks like in our node, so we've got our one Slack account set up. I've, for the sake of the video, just send the message to the user, which is me, so my username, simple text message, and then I've pulled this directly into here. And then if I hit execute, this fires this exact message directly into my Slack account. And what we have is we have this on one big loop. So this then goes back into our loop through client. So once it's sent, and then our loop will quite simply look at the next row on our client config, like our master sheet, to find the next client, find the next set of IDs, and then it will run this whole workflow again. And that is pretty much how you can set up a B2B SEO reporting automation directly in n8n. So I appreciate if you've stuck through to the end. I know it seems super complicated, but really the theory is quite simple, right? And in the age of AI, you can use Claude and GPT 5.2 to do so much of the heavy lifting on this. Like this took me maybe 2 hours, 3 hours to put together. And that was from idea of everything that I want all through to execution. So if you have enjoyed this video, then please do subscribe to the channel. It helps me enormously to understand the type of videos and the type of content that you guys want to see. And just finally, if you are a B2B SaaS and you're looking to generate more pipeline for your business going into next year, then jump onto sessionmedia.com, fill in that contact form or send me a DM on LinkedIn. Otherwise, I will see you next time.